Welcome to the Midlife Manifesto, where we are embracing the twists and turns and transformations of midlife. I am Arlene Scholten, your host and fellow traveler on this crazy journey. So if you're looking to reinvent yourself, rediscover your passions, or just make sense of this beautifully messy phase of your life, you're in the right place. I will be interviewing experts on a number of different topics, anything midlife, whether it be your health, wellness, perimenopause, relationships, rediscovering yourself, new adventures, career shifts, raising teenagers, you name it. We're going to discuss it all right here. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's get real about midlife, because it's more than a phase. It's our time to thrive. We can do this together, so join me on my journey. It's crazy, but let's make it some fun. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another podcast episode of the Midlife Manifesto, where we are redefining aging. And today, I'm very excited to have our guest with us today, Lindsay Cressey. So Lindsay is creator of Money L Plates. She's a trailblazer in redefining the relationship between money and women. With a mission to foster confidence, wisdom, and financial freedom, Lindsay's approach goes beyond numbers to focus on money mindset and empowerment. Her expertise as a dual qualified lawyer and teacher, certified money coach, and investor uniquely positions her to deliver a holistic approach to money and deeply impactful work through her private client coaching practice, aimed primarily at female entrepreneurs and in her educational masterclasses. So welcome to the podcast, Lindsay.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
So sex, drugs, rock and roll, and money and investing.
Money. It's a forbidden subject, yes.
Especially amongst women, I think, which is what we talked about briefly when I first spoke to you. So I met Lindsay. We were both doing a podcast course, and so when I saw Money L Plates, I thought, now that's somebody I want on my podcast. And then we had a nice long conversation a couple of weeks ago, and here we are.
Here we are. Very excited to be here. Thank you for asking me, Arlene. It's lovely to talk about it. I love talking about money.
So if we can just get started, if you tell me a little bit, obviously you're a lawyer and teacher by background. So how did you get to where you are right now?
Okay, well, thank you. Yes, I'm dual qualified. Like many women, I've had a busy life. Started out in the law. Really interestingly, when I look back at it, primarily to help women. And it's really interesting when you go to law school and then when you practice that you see the extremes of situations, and particularly when you're learning the law, the case studies are very much, when it comes to women, it's about how they possibly get trapped or stuck in situations they don't want to be in, coercion, all that kind of thing. That's just a small part of it. But I think my drive throughout my career has been to help women and to empower them. And when I did my teaching, I was really interested because I taught maths, amongst other things. I love teaching maths. And it's really interesting because the girls were lacking in confidence. And so I start, and there seems to be a big connection for women between money and their maths lessons, which is really interesting. And so they very often will say to me, I didn't like maths, therefore I'm not good at money. And so I became very interested in the subject. And I just immersed myself in it. I think I've been into about 5 years now.
Yeah.
The practical side and also the very much the mindset side.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was just listening to somebody, or where it was, but they were actually talking about the benefits of, especially when we're younger, girls and boys being separated in education, being separate. And they were saying, it was really interesting, actually. I was just listening to it earlier last week. And they were saying girls will dive into things that they wouldn't do if boys are present. And same thing, boys will dive into things maybe more on the creative side, like art, and things like that, and dress up maybe, whereas girls will, they'll take their chances at maths and more of the, I guess, traditional kind of male-oriented tasks. But they were saying that the benefits are huge, especially when they're younger, and then mix them together as they get older, once their confidence in those other areas are formed.
Yeah, that's a huge area for debate, isn't it? And actually, Arlene, I agree with that a lot. I went to a girls' school. I was really lucky. Went to Bolton School, and then on to a college at Oxford, which had been predominantly a women's college.
Yeah.
So, although it's mixed now. So yes, I think confidence is the key. The how-to is really straightforward.
Yeah.
But it's confidence, and I think as you become older, you end up tripping yourself up because you start, the confidence is tricky as you get older, particularly with money. And I think the other thing about girls and education, which I will say, because I am one of these people, is I was, you know, a real academic. I was striving. I was an A girl. I just went for it. And I see it now, and I have definitely made huge mistakes in all kinds of areas of my life. But I think this perfectionist drive stops women from getting going with money, from allowing themselves to start investing, because you have to make mistakes as you go along. You have to take little risks. No one's asking you to take all your money and invest it in one thing, but it stops women from taking those steps into that world.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did a podcast, one of the first ones with Tracy Donachie, if anyone's listened to it, on perfectionism.
Oh,
And
right.
it's really,
Okay.
really interesting. It's mainly in sport because that's where she that's where she spends her time and her expertise. But it was really, really interesting to see how perfectionists, how you can overcome that almost so you can be successful rather than paralyzed. But I think with money a lot, it's even for myself, my dad used to talk about it all the time. He used to talk about compound interest and investing in gold. And my Stitzers and I now are like, why didn't we listen to it?
I think that's like anything with children, though, isn't it? You know, when with my three, when I was getting them going with money, I sent them to someone else to learn about it because they weren't interested in what I had to say. I mean, they listen a little bit more now, but
when was this switch? Because I know you have 3 children.
I have 3
You have
children.
3 children. So when did you make the shift? You said about 5 years ago you shift from law into
So I was teaching. I was teaching during COVID, and the school I was in was we provided an incredible education service during COVID. So I was doing a lot of we did on-screen lessons all day. But I knew then probably that I wanted to make a shift away from teaching children, because I'd really loved that, and move more towards empowering women outside of the education system.
So when did you start getting involved or interested in investments?
Well, do you know, I'm from a very modest background in Lancashire, and probably like a lot of people, you know, my parents were born 1939, 1935, so you know, before the war. And so we were brought up in quite a frugal background, but my parents were keen, like many of that generation, to save and to invest. So they both invested small amounts, and they invested money, but they also invested in me and my brother's education. That was quite important, and made sacrifices to do that. So mum was a teacher, dad worked in the marine paint industry. So mum from a very early age used to talk about how she would, I think her salary was £14,000 at the time, and she would invest £25 a month into these different funds. And dad taught me to sort of buy and sell shares, and you know, I made some cracking mistakes. I once sold some shares that he put in my name. And I had to confess to him, and he said, "Why did you do it?" And I said, "I just wanted the money."
Well, it comes down to the discipline, isn't it?
And I can imagine. I mean, oh gosh, you know,
what would it be worth now, Lindsay?
Tell him. I'm having to tell him and say, "Where are those shares?" And I remember thinking, "Oh, crikey, I cashed them in." Anyway,
I had a great weekend.
Yeah. So I think it's always been there in the background.
Okay.
And I've always been interested, you know, when I did law as a property lawyer, I've always been interested in property. So now I taught myself to invest. You have, you know, you do it as you go along. So I invest in property, in businesses, actually, a couple of businesses.
Like startups.
Okay. Startup, and funds, and again shares. I've had, you know, some great stories of it not going well.
Any big flops that you want to share?
I've had a cracking one recently. I invested in one of the sort of music streaming businesses. And it was really hyped up. And normally I invest in funds, you know, so baskets of shares. So you know, you get diversity. But every so often, you know, I'm a little bit tempted. I honestly, you know, it's not much that I put in. It definitely is money that I can is spare. if any money is spared,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I thought, this is it. This is the next best thing. You know, we're going to be off. And then after a couple of years, there started to be a lot of stuff in the press about mismanagement in the company. And I thought, oh, crikey. And then I think the final straw, and it's still not sorted actually, was the company was delisted. It was, and they're sending me back my money, which was not very much. But when they sent it back, they sent it in a check made out in US dollars. So bear in mind that it was a UK listed company and I invested in British pounds. They say that I didn't tick the box to say what currency I was backing. Honestly, Arlene, we've been backwards and forwards on this and it's still not resolved. I mean, I think there's about £25 left in there. They've charged me a fee for transferring it back. I've tried to open a US dollar account. I don't have one. So, you know, I mean, it's, you know, you've got to laugh, haven't you, really? You know,
Yeah.
hopefully it'll be balanced out by something else that does well. It's
I'm
not all
sure
about
with your expertise it'll balance out somewhere.
yeah.
So we both have teenagers. I think yours are maybe a little
Mm,
bit older.
mm,
What is the best age? Obviously, this podcast is all about midlife. So I think
yeah,
sometimes, I guess what I want to really dive into is, I think sometimes people may think it's too late. They may feel like they don't have that much to invest, so they kind of just don't or put it off.
yeah,
Like we put
yeah,
a lot of things off. But like one of the things I tell my patients, even when they come in and they've got, maybe some degeneration in their spine, I'm like, you better start now. Like I think
yeah,
investing, and it's almost like I always say, this is like your health is like your pension.
yeah,
So yeah, you probably started a bit late, but it's still better to do something now rather
yeah,
than nothing, because you can't go back. I can't go back to my 20s and start my pension in my 20s, which is really what my dad wanted me to do. I should have done, but I
yeah,
didn't. Um, and so like, yeah, that's what I always say. It's better to start now, like start lifting weights, start to exercising now, because you need something later, whether
yeah.
you retire at 70, 80, whatever, 65, which not many people are doing anymore. But yeah, I guess I want to hear from you. At what age is it maybe too late? Is it ever too
Oh,
late?
Arlene, it's never too late. It can never be too late. Um, I think it's interesting because the generation that we are, the midlife generation, actually, when we were starting work back in the late 80s and 90s, obligatory pensions weren't there. You know, you were lucky if you were in a scheme, if you were a teacher or a doctor or whatever, you would have them. But the law firm I was at didn't have them. And so there are quite a lot of women now who don't have as much as perhaps they would have done if they'd started earlier. So the past is done, it is what it is.
Yeah.
So I'm 56, and for example, my mother-in-law is 94.
Hmm.
So if I was starting now at 22, 40 years would sound like a really long time to invest, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So if I start now, I could still have 20, 30, 40 years. And, you know, there's lots of ways to invest in a tax efficient way, and putting it into a pension is one of them.
Yeah.
Using ISAs is another,
Yeah.
premium bonds is another. There's lots of ways to work out what to do with your money. But I think, yes, because of inflation and because the markets and compound interest work together and increase your money a lot better in the long term. So longer term, I would always say, is over 7 to 10 years and beyond that time. So if you want anything in the next 5 years, if you were younger, you were saving it for a property or something, then you would perhaps not put it into a stocks and shares either. You might, but you wouldn't put it into property, say, because getting your investment out of property is a long process and not guaranteed.
Yeah.
So I would say it's never too late, and time just passes, doesn't it? You know, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know about you. I feel the same as I did when I was in my 20s, and I mean, I don't look it anymore. But
I
I do.
sometimes say that and I'm like, no, I don't feel 20, especially if I have a night out. I really don't feel 20
Well, there
anymore.
is that. There is that. But you know, and my mum, who's 86, said to me the other day, she said, you know, Lindsay, it's a real surprise because I feel exactly the same as I did. And so
That's amazing.
that aging process, although our bodies age and time passes, we feel the
Mm,
same.
yeah.
So life is never going to get any cheaper, is it?
No, it's not. But I think pensioners sometimes have it's, oh, I'm a pensioner, and I don't ever want to be like that. You got to do the work now. You know, I want to be a
Yeah.
pensioner if I ever retire, but that still has an amazing life, full of health and full of wealth, really.
Yeah.
You know, and I
Yeah.
guess
And
it's learning now how to, yeah, what to do and how to set yourself up for the
and how to
future.
create it. And
Yeah.
I totally agree with, and you know, you deal very much on the health side, and that's something that I think that long-term investment is
Mm.
key, isn't it? You know,
It's huge and it takes time and it takes discipline.
yeah,
Because I was
yeah,
looking on this morning, I was looking on the compound interest calculator for my daughter, which I'm going to send
yeah,
to her.
yeah.
So I was looking if she does 250 pounds a month for 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
estimated interest rate, I put 7. It's probably going to be
Yeah,
more than
yeah,
that, won't
yeah,
it? 7 to
yeah,
9.
yeah.
So you calculate that, and it's 131,000. I mean, and if you compare that to what she will have had to put in to get there, you know,
Yeah,
it's good.
yeah. The sooner you start, the
And not
better.
that she can retire
Everyone,
on that, but it's a good chunk of cash
yeah, and I
when
do
you're
think
when you're
having those
40.
pots.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sorry.
I do think having those pots. So, you know, my mum, when she did all this investing, she's got all these pots alongside her pension. So, you know, you could never say that they weren't useful,
Mm.
however you want to live your life.
So what are some of the pots that we should be looking at?
So I think, well, first of all, I would say don't be scared of taking advice, of going to a
Mhm.
financial advisor. I would say that's very useful, and there's some really good ones out there, independent, a lot of female run businesses now where they
Yeah,
will be able to guide you on these things. But I would say I mean, you can start a pension when you're a child now. And so, you know, so as adults, we can pay into our children's pensions. So that would be amazing, wouldn't it, to grow, because then the government puts money in as well.
yeah. And what age
Um,
do you have to be to start a pension?
I think you can just have it from, I mean, you'd have to check, and I don't have that fact at my
Okay,
fingertips, but
okay,
I think as a child you can start. And you can
okay.
definitely have child ISAs.
Yeah, you can do ISAs. Is pension is it 16?
Is it
I remember.
16? I'm sorry not to know that, Arlene.
It's okay. No, it's okay.
You
It's
can
okay.
find
That's why
out.
we're having a conversation.
You can
I will
find
Google
out.
it.
Put it in your notes later.
But it is,
Um,
yeah, it is interesting actually to look at, you know, you wouldn't start thinking of starting a pension. You would start doing an ISA for a child, but not necessarily a pension.
yeah, but you can do both.
Yeah, yeah. And I
Mm,
guess that's the pots, isn't it?
yeah, and I think the joy of the pension is the government will top it up. Even if you're not a taxpayer, they put in that contribution. I think that's correct. Again, these things change over time, you know, when
Yeah.
budgets come and go. You just need to check them. But it's being aware of the opportunities, isn't it? And I think with the children, you know, I've encouraged mine to invest. It's tricky. Now, this is one of the pitfalls, because I think when with everything on your phone, and it is so easy
Mm.
to invest in all different ways, but I think people can get really fixated with daily changes, hourly changes, and when you invest, you have to leave it.
Yeah.
You have to ride it out, because the markets do this all the time
Mm.
according to whatever's going on. So
I'm guilty.
you have to. Are you get?
Yes, it's so bad. I moved mine over about a year and a half ago because my pension was with, well, I won't name the company, but it was with a company who's gotten a lot of stick for their fees.
Okay.
And as I've started to learn a little bit more, I'm thinking,
Yeah.
okay, these fees over time are actually going to steal a huge pot of this cash.
Yeah.
So I moved it over to Vanguard. And I've no ties to Vanguard. There's a lot of other ones that you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
use, but it was just one
Yeah.
that was recommended to me.
Yeah.
But because I have the Vanguard app, I can see what my pension is doing every day. And it's, yeah, it's because we're now in the Trump slump, aren't we? And I'm looking at my investments on my pension. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's quite scary.
Yeah. I think
But I'm
I
not
think
retiring tomorrow, so it's okay. But it's like you say, they always say it's the time in the market, not timing the
yeah,
market. So, I mean, I'm
absolutely.
not retiring anytime soon.
Absolutely.
So,
And you have to, I think with this, it's one of those really good examples of a time when you have to zoom out of it. So,
yeah.
you know, if you were watching the news minute by minute, I can't remember the guy who talks about this, but if you watching the news minute by minute, your dopamine, your adrenaline would be going
Mm,
all day long. And if you zoomed out after a day, you just get a summary of a day, and that
yeah.
might be, you know, pretty tough. After a week, you get a summary of a week. After a month, etc.,
It's
etc. So
interesting.
by the
Yeah.
time you come out after 5 years, if you look at it, you know, a bird's eye view of your 5 years, it should have gone up. There will be dips as it goes along, and the world is pretty crazy at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think one of the slight problems of checking all the time, and I can see the kids checking. One of mine's got a little bit of crypto, and he's always, it's up, it's this, it's
Yeah.
But you're tempted to do things when it falls.
Yeah.
So, and in fact, what you have to do, and what women are really good at doing, is being a lot more long term. So they talk about, when the prices fall, in fact, that's quite a good time to invest. It's a bit like buying in a sale.
Yeah.
So something else to consider is doing monthly investments, setting up a standing order for a monthly investment, because you get to buy the shares at different prices.
Yeah.
So overall, you get quite a good spread of the share prices.
Yeah, I think it's the discipline too.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a practice, and I think sadly we're very practiced at spending.
Yeah.
And saving, and I think we talked. I think you mentioned about getting the dopamine hit from watching your savings grow, as opposed to the dopamine hit from spending. And I think that's a really good one. Really good.
Just trying to shift it.
Yeah, it's a practice.
But it's hard because you do get dopamine hits when you shop and you buy something, but it doesn't last very long.
Yeah.
But it's also just kind of switching that. Like you say, obviously a lot of what you do and you teach women is the mindset behind this. Before we go into that though, you mentioned crypto. My husband thinks it's tulip bulbs. What do you think?
It's too what? Sorry, I didn't
He
catch
thinks
it.
it's tulip bulbs. He just thinks it's nothing really. He thinks it's just all going to crash.
Well,
And
yeah.
I want you to tell me it's wrong, because one of my kids is quite interested in crypto, and we have I have a little bit of crypto, not a huge amount, a little bit, maybe like your last investment. It's not going to break me if it all turns into tulip bulbs, but I didn't want to miss out if it does turn into something more than that. So, and my 16-year-old is really interested in it, and I know nothing, but he sounds, he's really interested. And I just think if my son's interested in investing, I'm going to, try to help him, not help him, but support him. Keep him excited.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to know it's unregulated still in the UK. And I think a couple of them are actually banned now. So trying to get your money out can be a little bit tricky. So it's one of those things, isn't it? I think the generation, with TikTok and everything, they're very into it, and it can do really, really well, and people have got really, really good stories. But as with any money story, you don't always hear about the person who has completely lost. It's a real balance. There's a great book by Morgan Grenshaw, I think it is, called The Psychology of Money, and he talks about money over time. And he talks about that very fact, about how, whatever period of history we're in, the people are making all the money and they're talking about it and everything. He talks particularly about New York at the turn of the century, of the last century. So you hear all the great stories and everyone's doing really well and everyone wants to get in. It's a bit like a gold rush, but then it's only time that shows the actual reality of what's going on. So with crypto, I don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody has a crystal ball. It's and a lot of people I know have got a little bit. I haven't got any, but I know at least one of my children's got some. So I think it's one of those things where if you have to know you can get hold of it safely.
Yeah.
That's one of the keys. You have to know your keys, and you need to not pile it all in there. I'd say, have a diverse.
It's funny. Everyone has a family WhatsApp, doesn't it? And when Bitcoin plummeted the other day, my husband was putting a screenshot on there, and he just tulip bulbs, tulip bulbs.
Thing is, Marlene, and this is the real money mindset. We can create a narrative around whatever we want to see.
Yeah,
it's the same in anything in life, isn't it? So if you believe that Bitcoin is the be all and end all, then you'll find all that evidence that will support that. And if you think it's not, then you'll find all the evidence against it. And with money and money beliefs, that's very important, because if you have a money story about what money represents and you think it is evil, or you think it is vulgar or whatever, then you'll constantly find evidence to back that up. If you choose a different path, then you have to start looking for more evidence.
So was your money journey or your understanding of money and wealth from a childhood? You say you grew up in in quite a modest family. Was it, would you say you grew up with a healthy relationship with money then? Like, did you feel comfortable taking some risks? Like you said you got into property and investing. So obviously you're taking some risks there. You've obviously mentioned that you've
Yeah.
lost some, but how would you say your relationship with money has changed, or was your childhood almost like a healthy platform on which you built, or were there any limiting beliefs to money that you had to really work on, and that's how you ended up where you are, or was it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. I think it's really interesting, and I think I've definitely had different seasons in my life with different, when I was younger, when I was a teen and a waitress, I loved to waitress and I loved to collect it. And I
Yeah,
just, I stored it all in a jar and I just loved to watch it grow, and all that kind of thing.
cash is
Um,
king.
yes, cash is king. And I still have, I mean, my friends wouldn't be surprised. I still have my written records from those days, my cash books. But then definitely, when I went to work and got a salary, I was really good at spending it actually.
Right.
And it was the late 80s, early 90s. We were in the city, we were wearing great suits, all that kind of
Yeah.
thing. So my ability to save and be fabulous with it switched into a different phase. So I definitely had phases. And yes, I mean, I think like anyone, I was, my dad, there's historical stories of his family, losing money, and so he was very careful with his money. His parents had both died, one when he was 2, one when he was 15. So
Oh, wow.
he was very prudent with it. And I think I had a backlash against that. And I think that's very
Yeah.
common as well. I thought I remember thinking, gosh, why do they have to take weeks to make a decision? so I think they were very careful. Whereas I think,
Yeah.
and it's not to criticize, it simply was what it was, you know. Whereas I think I went a bit the other way actually, and could make decisions really quickly and spend really quickly. So I've definitely experienced both sides of it, and I think having children brings it into focus, doesn't it, in terms of
Yeah.
what you want to pass on, what you're modeling to them.
Yeah.
And I think talking to them, I think one of the biggest things I always say to all of my clients is just talk about it, because if we're going to shift this paradigm
Yeah.
with about money and wealth and power and bring it into the female space,
Yeah.
then we
Do you
have,
think it's more of a fear or a lack of understanding,
I
or
think,
more of a, yeah, I guess something that we carry on from our parents, or is it?
I think it's all of those things. I think it's layer after layer after layer. And I think when you are, our first experience of money is as a child in a home. So if you think that money causes, 95% of arguments within a relationship, even
Is that right?
or tension, definitely tension,
Right.
then it's
And it's not about you have too much money.
well,
The
even
opposite, is
it's
it? Or is
interesting,
it just,
even with too much, even with lots and lots of money, then you talk about financial coercion.
yeah,
So there's a good and a bad side to all of
yeah,
it. But what you do as children is we pick up the emotion around the money. So
yeah,
money itself is just a resource, isn't it? It's simply an exchange. I pay you and you give me the service. I pay you, you give me the coffee. It's simply a mode of exchange. And yet the emotion that is driven into it, particularly with women, just can paralyze them, absolutely paralyze them. And I think, it's not helpful, or it's not helpful. It is what it is in terms of, if we have children and we step away from work and, you're in a partnership, and I know I am, where, I can do what I do because my husband has got a really good job and
yeah,
he supports me, and
yeah,
he's very generous and very kind, and our money is his money is our money.
yeah,
And I know I'm very lucky with that. So you have a changing relationship with it as you go through. And but I think what's really important and key is to take a moment to think what yours is. And if you aren't if you're, for example, an entrepreneur and you're not feeling comfortable around the money, and you're not feeling comfortable asking for money or raising your prices or talking about money, and you're not allowing money in, because maybe your bank account you haven't set up your business bank account to allow it in.
Yeah.
All these little parts of money which really impact our lives all the time. I find it absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, because it's interesting talking to you, come at it more from almost like an energetic, I guess, angle rather than just, like you say, it's an exchange, but it's an exchange of, quality and what we value
Yeah,
and where we want to put our money. And it's, yeah, you very, I guess it's maybe a more of a female kind of model of looking at money more from an energetic side.
I totally agree, Arlene. I think I very often have people say they don't want to talk about money, and then they're very happy to talk to me about money.
Yeah.
I have lots and lots of interesting conversations all the time with all kinds of people. And people will say, oh, my husband says, just save, just do this.
Yeah.
And they'll say, but that's not, I spend because, I'm nurturing the children, or I'm doing this, or I want to create a lovely experience. And so I think we do money from a very different place. We do it from a soul and a heart place, I think. And I think receiving money is key when you look at how, because we're used to caring and giving and not being paid for it. We have to see how we receive things. So how do we receive love? How do we receive compliments? How do you receive it if your friend says, let me buy lunch? We do all the argy-bargy, I couldn't possibly know, I couldn't, you feel that you owe somebody something if they've bought something for you because they're offering you a gift.
Yeah.
Gift, So receiving money falls into that emotion, I think. And you can't receive something if you don't have a really good relationship with it.
No, that's true. That's one of the reasons I wanted you on, just to, to dive into this aspect of it. What sort of clients do you get then? Are they, I know it's mainly women, isn't it? And is there a certain age that you seem to attract?
I have, yes, I have two sort of key ages. One is sort of around about the mid to late 20s, 30s, sort of people when they've had their 20s and had a great time, and suddenly they start to think, oh, right, okay, I need to, start saving, or they're running business, they're entrepreneurs and they're running businesses, and or they're getting a partner together, and then that kind of literally a marriage is a marriage of two money stories, and really different. And in fact, I think most people's are very different. And I think, you and I spoke, didn't we, about when you first get married and you have to work out how to do Christmas.
Yeah.
And how the first year my husband and I both went home to our parents because we couldn't work out how to do Christmas.
Well, mine are Dutch. My parents are Dutch. So you celebrate Christmas on the 5th of December at Sinterklaas. And it's gags, like it's jokes and it's small presents and it's Black Peter, and that's and then we'd have a Christmas, but it was definitely not like showered with gifts. So whereas my husband was like stockings full, tree full, and it did my head in. Like I seriously have to take a few deep breaths before Christmas. And I'm just like, can we just tone this whole thing down? But that's how he grew up. And I guess, that's how the kids think Christmas is. One on that one. But even now I'm like, can we just tone this down? Like,
and on that note,
but it's interesting, because you're coming together with a lot of things that you didn't talk about before. You don't really talk about how do you celebrate Christmas with children, or how do you, how do you spend your money? How do you invest your money? Those are probably topics you probably do talk about before you get married, but it's all of a sudden when it all joins together, I can see clashes.
Yes.
In some relationships.
Yeah, definitely. And I think even I was on a great webinar last week about debt run by the FT, and we were talking about credit card debt and saying that, many women get into credit card debt because their husbands don't know the cost of things like Christmas and the real cost of food and the real cost of clothing the children, and you're on a bit of a treadmill trying to keep up.
Yeah.
And so they start putting stuff on cards. So yes, that whole kind of, having lots of stockings and trees and Instagram, it really encourages you to spend, doesn't it? To create an image that perhaps
Yeah. I
isn't
quite like
real.
the minimalistic side of it, but it's hard when, I guess you fall into the trap too when their friends are getting, when they've got all these presents. But I quite like just a few things under the tree. And
I've
we
been
go away now for Christmas, so we do much less because we just can't bring it all with us. But I love it because
good idea. Get away.
I love everything else about Christmas. I love, getting together with friends and family, and I like the social aspect of December. I quite like that it's a bit crazy and chaotic, and then I love January.
Yes.
But the Christmas day itself, yeah, all the presents kind of does my head in, if I'm completely honest.
So Arlene, can I ask you a question back?
Yeah,
Because we haven't talked about this, and so you're Dutch.
yeah.
So you'll have a different approach to money and the family, and was it talked about within your family? Are you encouraged to
My
invest?
my dad was one of 12, so he grew up in a farm near the German border in Holland, and then my mum was in Wassenaar, which is near Leiden, if anyone knows, near the beach. So my mum lost her father, who had a very, very good job when she was 3 in the war. So she was raised by a single mom, like many kids in Holland were at the time.
Yeah.
And so everything was tight. Like
Mm.
they didn't have a lot. She actually remembers, and I've mentioned this in a podcast before, where she was kind of sucking the juice out of the dishcloth to try to get something out of it.
Yeah.
And it's so for her, but she also looks back on her childhood in a very joyful way because no one had anything.
Yeah.
So all kids played out.
Yeah.
Nobody had anything. A lot of her friends had lost their fathers,
Yeah.
and she doesn't look at it in a negative light.
Mm.
And then she went on and became, she was a qualified teacher in Holland and then met my dad. Whereas my dad they worked really, really hard on the farm. So they always had food. I don't think he grew up with a lack mindset at all. And then he got into property in the States when he moved over. He was one of the only brothers that went to university. Um, but I guess yeah, I guess my dad did lose his job when I was about 8, and he had a really good job. He had double degree, PhD, you name it. But he had property so he could pay off our house. But yeah, after that, it was, I don't know if I guess he always talked to us about investments and he talked about his compound interest. So there was money talk in the house,
Yeah.
but yeah, we didn't grow up in abundance, for example.
No.
And I guess it's interesting. You sometimes wonder, like, had you, if you grew up in abundance, what your relationship with money would be like? Would you take more risks, I guess? I guess when you talk about money, it's like energy, isn't it? And it should just flow. It should come and go and flow. But I guess when you don't have a very healthy, or you think there's a certain amount, a limited amount of money, you don't let it flow. So you hold on to it. So you
Yeah.
may not invest it,
Yeah.
like somebody with a healthier mindset.
Yeah, definitely. A scarcity mindset or a lack, or that idea that money will run out.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. I don't think that the mindset will apply whether you have a lot of money or not very much money. And we all know
Yeah.
people who have an awful lot of money, but who live very frugally.
Exactly. And that's why I think that your background is really interesting because it doesn't necessarily shape you because you can look at another story and shape them in a completely different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you talk about risk, it's really interesting. So, I find money quite exciting and I'm interested in it and I'm quite happy to take risks. Whereas I know that my husband, for example, isn't like that. And I think that's very common again in relationships to have the more riskier one and then the steady, the
Yeah.
backstop who restricts that risk, which is a good thing. It's a really good thing.
Yeah.
So I think, and I don't, when you ask about my background, I don't know if that risk comes from growing up. I don't know. My parents weren't risky people.
Yeah. They were just solid and
They were
consistent.
solid. But then
Yeah.
I went into a world, where I suppose my eyes were open to it.
Yeah.
And it was
It was interesting though, because obviously 3 of us went to university. My parents couldn't afford to pay for our university. So we all took out student loans, and I remember I was going to go into so in North America, you have to study chiropractic, you have to do your pre-med studies first. So I did that, and kind of almost through that, I was working towards a physical therapist, and I was family friends that were studying chiropractic, and they ran into my mom and they said, "Oh, tell Arlene to come over tonight for drinks." And they convinced me or changed my mind because they told me about this beautiful thing called chiropractic that I had actually no idea what it was. So we looked at schools. They had gone to Minneapolis, and you could do it in. So after your 3-year degree and doing your pre-med, you could go and do 3.5 years in the States. So without your summer, so you could just get it done. That's where they went.
Yeah.
So we looked at the fees, and I was going to be $120,000 in debt by the time I was done with school. And my dad looked at me and he goes, "Is this really what you want to do?" And I said, "Yes." He goes, "Then fine, then do it." So, when everyone was buying their first house, I was just, and in North America, if you don't pay, I know a lot of people don't pay their student loans apparently in this country, in the UK, but
Yeah, it's
in
such a
North
good
America, you
way here.
have to.
You have to, yeah. Yeah.
So I paid off every penny of that $120,000.
Wow.
So, but I get to do something, and I wouldn't recommend this to many people unless you have a job at the end of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, when everyone else was, and I guess it was that probably did shape me because you've just got this black hole
Right.
all
Okay.
the time, and it's a huge debt.
I mean, 120,000, and is it compounding as well in interest? Is it, or does
So
it?
it doesn't compound until you graduate. Whereas
Okay, but
here it
then
compounds, which is one of the crazy things, because I've got a daughter in university and she has taken the fees as a loan.
yeah,
And it compounds right away, which I think is
yeah.
incredible from the government. If you're trying to encourage young kids to take a risk to go to university, especially those without any family support,
Mm,
to know that you're incurring 7% interest right from the day you start
mm,
is
mm.
pretty crazy. It's not
It's
really
very naughty. It's very
it
naughty.
is,
And I
yeah,
think that's why we have a lot of problems with debt now, because I think
yeah,
the word debt is applied to that student loan. So it's called a student debt. But in fact, the way we work it in this country is more like a tax.
yeah,
But then consumer debt, that's, your overdraft, you buy now, pay later. That's, huge amongst the student population. They just, and their credit cards, they're tapping. And so they get into debt, but it's not the same as a student loan debt. So
no,
there's confusion with the language. And I think it's pretty dangerous, actually.
yeah. Because I would think that the loans that she's taking out for the tuition is an investment in your education.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
But why the fact that I was really shocked when I found out that the interest accrues straight away.
Yeah. And so going back to your £120,000 loan and how you felt about it, what did you, because presumably everyone is in the same boat, which makes it, and everyone
Yes.
talk about it as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
okay.
some were lucky enough to have parents pay for some of it, but when you're in school for 6.5, 7 years, there's not that many parents that can fund the tuition and your housing and your food and your spending. There's not that many parents that can fund that amount of
No,
money.
no,
But
it's huge.
some of my friends were graduating with much less. Some graduated with more.
Yeah.
My sister's a naturopathic doctor, so she did 8 years. I don't even know what her student loan debt was.
So what's the practice? Do you all recognize that you work to pay it off, and that's what you're
Yeah,
all doing?
yeah,
Because I've noticed with some of my peers in America, they always talk about the debt, the student loan debt, and then they manage to pay off the student loan debt. And so
yeah,
you expect to work and then put a portion of that across into that debt.
yeah.
Yeah.
And what I did is which is probably not, it wouldn't be what I would recommend my kids do, but my parents never did debt. I remember when my sister and I moved into a flat in Amsterdam when I graduated, she was working in Amsterdam for a bank. We went to IKEA to furnish this apartment. And so when you move into a new apartment in Amsterdam, they take everything, light fixtures, carpet, like there is
Oh my
a
goodness.
shell. It's crazy. So we so we had to furnish this thing with everything from light fixtures to carpets to everything. So we went into IKEA and we get to the till with quite a lot of stuff. And we were going to put it on my sister's credit card. At the time, this is early millennia, they didn't take credit cards.
Oh,
So we had to put like everything back. I think we walked out with a sofa and a chair and some lamps.
all that time. That
Yeah.
time in
So
IKEA.
yeah, it was just great. But I think it really did. I just fell in debt, and I wasn't putting money into a pension at the time, which I should have done both. shoulda, woulda, coulda, hey, but I guess had I had a mentor that would have sat me down and just said, this, it's okay to have the debt. Like
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
you've got to balance the two. But what I kept doing, I just kept putting money into it. But
Okay. So
so that's where my
you just worked
focus
to
was
pay it
just
off.
there. Yeah. And I should have traveled a little bit more. You know, I shouldn't have been so paranoid about this thing, but my aim was to get that thing done.
Yeah. Yeah. And that again, that's what I'm talking about. It's a seasoning your life, isn't it? Really, and
Mm,
we'll look back and have uh,
yeah.
with hindsight, it's quite a great thing, isn't it? But
But I think it's also important, like my kids, I always say, get yourself a mentor in different areas of your life,
yeah,
you know, not just necessarily your parents, and learn from some of the quote unquote mistakes we've made,
absolutely.
but, you know, have somebody that you can role model and, you know, just, you know, I can do this or this. What do you think is the best idea? You know, if, you know,
Yeah.
so that they start to learn really quite young.
Yeah. And
Because
collect
I
the
had no one really to ask about, you know, should I just pay this off? Or should I? And there was only at a networking thing when I was quite a young chiropractor. There was a guy who did he did pensions. And so I set one up probably in my mid-20s. And then I stopped paying into it for a while because I just started wanting to pay, you know, pay off this debt. But
yeah. Well, it's not. It doesn't seem a priority when you're in your 20s, does it?
no, it doesn't. It was just, I think he's kind of started showing us the compound
Yeah.
interest. And I was like, oh, okay, that's probably quite clever. And I think I had kids and you went to buy a house. So I put, you know, I put that on hold.
Yeah.
But it's the discipline because you want the money now, especially in your 20s, early 30s.
Of course you do, because you're having your best time then, aren't you? Really.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I didn't. I suppose my regret from then was I was in London in sort of early 90s, and I looked at buying a flat, and they were about £90,000 at the time.
In the center of
I
London.
mean, it sounds bonkers, and I
Yeah,
was on a salary of 33, which was an awful lot of money.
yeah,
But talk about the family. My family really weren't. We hadn't used property as investment. That's not
yeah,
what we knew.
yeah.
And we, at the end of the 80s, we were coming out of a 17% interest rate on the
That's
mortgage.
true. Yeah, yeah,
So that was very much part of, we were all very aware at that time that, I think it settled at 15%. That's a huge amount on
well, I know when people complain now, my husband's like, God, they don't really know. They don't
yeah. I mean,
understand
yeah,
history.
yeah. I mean, there were more practical, and just some common sense was applied then. You couldn't borrow more than 3 times your salary, and I think the banks have got carried away with just literally throwing the money, because of course they
Yeah,
want to have a mortgage because they're going to make money from it.
yeah.
So I didn't buy the flat for £89,000, which the
It's
children.
okay. I
I
see a
I have
tear forming.
Yeah, the children like to remind me when and it was down the Fulham Road, and it was opposite Stamford Bridge.
Oh,
But at the time, Arlene, Stamford Bridge was really quite grotty. And
yeah,
as,
yeah, yeah,
and as a woman on my own, young woman on my own, coming home from work late at night, I didn't particularly want to go there. There's lots of
yeah.
factors, isn't there? It's never that straightforward as
Hindsight, hey?
hindsight. Absolutely. Absolutely. Don't judge me, is what I say to the kids. But that's actually, on that note, I think what's really good to get your kids talking about money, whether it's around your supper table or in the car or whatever, is get
Yeah,
them to ask you or ask their grandparents about the money mistakes they've made, because of course kids just love it. They love when you've made mistakes, and of course they, because they, I don't know, it sort of adds to their rich tapestry of you not being a perfect
oh,
parent.
ours just get angry,
They start to realize that you're not.
especially for my husband's family.
Yeah.
You did
So
what?
that's a really good family game when you.
We've played it. I don't like it. So that comes to so obviously we have kids who are probably, you know, this country is so is North America, obsessed with home ownership.
Yeah.
What do you think about home ownership now? I mean, I don't know if you had a crystal ball and you could see into the future, but is it still, I mean, they could put their money anywhere, couldn't they? I mean, they could put their money in an S&P fund and it probably goes up between 7-9% a year compounded. I
Yeah.
mean, are you going to get the same return on a house?
Well, I think the thing with the house, I mean, I find the whole, again, as a property lawyer, I find the whole situation with mortgages extraordinary. That we
Mm,
take out a loan that then costs so much interest and costs 25 years or 35 years to pay back. I suppose when you get to retirement, if you
You've
own
paid it
your own
off.
home
Yeah.
and you've paid it off, then
But equally, that money could have been sitting in an S&P fund.
yeah, you have to. I suppose the thing about renting at that age is you have to then have the income to pay that rent.
True. Yes.
Whereas when your mortgage stops, because you own the home and you can, you can release equity on it, and you can downsize, or do whatever you want. But it's so tough, isn't it? It's so hard. I mean, I live up in the northeast now of England, and we have properties up here which are affordable. And I am lucky. I'm from a northern family, so across in Lancashire or up here, you can buy property. But I think if you're in London and you're a kid and you're not on a huge salary, it's the rate at which the rents have been going up,
Yeah.
and the awful kind of bidding of rents, when they're having to keep putting bids in for who's going to
Yeah.
pay the most rent. I mean, I think it's unethical, and I'm
Yeah.
a landlord, and I just think some of the practices are dreadful. They're really dreadful. So I think they're caught between a rock and a hard place, aren't they? Because
Yeah.
so much money is going into their rent and their cost of living, and we're saying to them, pay into a pension, pay into an investment. Be sensible.
I know. Don't go out on Friday.
Don't live like we do.
The good days are gone, darling.
But I think what is going to happen at some point, and it's going to be interesting to watch. And again, this is a bird's eye view, is that wealth is going to get passed down. So the wealth which the media, the 24/7 media, they really sort of try and make everything very black and white and make people against each other. So this idea that there's the wealthy baby boomers and the younger ones coming through, but that wealth will get released when those baby boomers die. It's going to come down in whatever format, either property, shares, heirlooms.
Yes.
So it's gonna come down. So it may be that they find themselves at a slightly later stage, actually with a chunk of money which they can then use to buy property. It's just that this route through, which was perhaps a bit easier. Having said that, Arlene, in terms of cycles, my grandma rented her house. She didn't own her house. Most people in her village rented their houses at the time.
Same as Germany. We have had a few German au pairs, and none of their parents own their house.
Yeah.
And it's not because they can't afford one. It's just kind of a choice that they have.
Yeah.
They just rent.
They just rent. And I mean, I suppose the rents were nominally lower than they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, isn't it? And I think it's tough. It's tough for them, especially now when you're starting to hear about people being laid off. I feel like we're in a bit of a repeat cycle of history from the early 90s.
Yeah, it's weird times out there. It's like, I sometimes just turn the news off for a while. It's
Yeah,
kind of
I
like
do.
we were saying before.
Yeah.
It's, is it going to change that much in the next few weeks? Probably not. Well, I'd like to think it would, but doesn't seem to be.
I know. See, I mean, I very much believe in protecting your energy.
Yeah.
Against.
Yeah. It was interesting. Sometimes on the news, not necessarily on the news, but they criticize the young for their Uber Eats and their cell phones. And a lot of them, when they're asked about it, they say, well, I have, the thought of owning a home or creating any wealth is actually, it's quite stressful, and it kind of feels like it's untangible. So they just enjoy the little pleasures, like a Starbucks or an Uber Eats. What is probably the one financial habit you would tell either to people in their midlife, maybe it's a different habit, or like our teenage kids? My eldest is 19. Is there one habit that would kind of cover both bases, that if we haven't gotten into a habit yet, that you would recommend that we start?
Yeah, I think I would get into a practice of, well, first of all, I think you should always know your numbers, and you should always.
What numbers, particular, specifically?
You just need to know where your money is.
Yeah.
You need
like a spreadsheet, for example.
Yeah, however you do it. I do. That I have got spreadsheets, but I really use paper. I'm really old-fashioned. paper and pen for me.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
also then I have quite a good historical view of what's going on. So I think you need to know where your money is. And
yeah,
I think particularly, and this is perhaps my lawyer side of it, is don't hand away the power of it. So don't sign stuff that you don't know what it is, for
yeah,
example.
yeah,
And again, I've got girlfriends who are really, really smart, who've signed stuff and not realised that their husbands, now ex-husbands, were remortgaging the house. Didn't know what they were signing. So I think that, just so have your integrity when it comes to your money. I think trust yourself to be a good steward of it. Trust yourself. You can learn. I think anyone can learn. And you have to practice into the investment. It's quite there's a lot of male language out there. It's quite a macho world still.
yeah,
But in the last 3 or 4 years, particularly with your phone, you can get direct into investing, and you can start to invest, and you can just play, just have a little bit of fun. And it doesn't have to be huge, and it doesn't have to dominate your thoughts. And but if you don't start, then and just start with £35, £50 a month.
yeah,
If you don't start, then you just spend that money somewhere else.
exactly. And I think we could all shave a little bit of.
I think we can. And I know it's hard to say, and I will be shouted down for saying it, but I truly believe when people say they've got no money left, and then I look at them and I think, well, I can see that you're just choosing not to do it.
Yeah,
You have to choose to make investments.
yeah,
And you have to choose a practice, and you just have it. So you have to wear your money quite lightly in that respect.
yeah,
And allow it to be a force of good, and allow it to be fun, and think, well, sometimes I'll make mistakes, and a bit like when you're cooking, your recipe might be slightly different, and sometimes you might leave it in the oven a bit longer, but you just carry on, and the next time you do something different. So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be this whole thing that we're feared and
No, and it doesn't have to be heavy. So you just need to, I think you just need to allow yourself to embrace it a bit more.
yeah. Obviously the world of everything is changing.
Yes.
What trends and sort of and sectors are, I guess, some of the most exciting that you think in the next 5-10 years for investing?
That's really interesting. Thank you for that question. I was on an investment masterclass quite recently. They were talking about just this subject because the world is changing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, we talked earlier about debt.
Yeah.
And Visa and MasterCard are I'll talk about things, but obviously I'm not endorsing them. It's just a general discussion.
Okay.
But for example, Visa and MasterCard have got an incredible tailwind of success, because if you think about where you shop, everywhere now accepts Visa and MasterCard, and they're just two corporates.
Yeah.
So that financial world is making a lot of money at the moment. So that's really interesting one to watch. I think with an aging population, I think things like, what health provisions for that aging population,
Yeah.
whatever they may hold. It's interesting with the tech, isn't it? With because, for example, Zoom, which did so well during COVID, has now tailed off a bit, because people have got a little bit, they want to do other things.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's and I think also our food, where what's happening with our food. I think that's really important.
I don't know what is happening with our food. There was something on the news. Was it yesterday when I was driving in? And I just caught it briefly, but it was something about obviously, they want, well, it's not even real food anymore. It's all, everything's grown in petri dishes and using, it was about dairy, and it wasn't even really dairy. And I thought, well, I don't want that kind of stuff. Like, I want real food grown on British farms.
Yes, absolutely. And this is where I think as women we can be really good stewards of money, because we make those choices, don't we? If we, I want to buy local, I want to buy British.
Yeah.
And so we make those choices every day in the supermarket or the local shops is where I go. And then we can make those choices when it comes to our investments.
Yeah.
so we can choose which company receives our money, you know, and therefore
Absolutely.
we can if we all do it, we can start to drive real good in the world. Because if
I
we're
do. I think, yeah, I think money is incredibly powerful and it's very energetic. And I think when you have some good intentions, and the more money you have, it gives you freedom to choose what you want to
oh,
eat, choose where you
absolutely,
want to go.
yeah,
You could buy a field and just leave it so they can't get it, you know,
yeah.
it just, yeah, there's so much you could do
Yeah,
with
I love
very, very
that. You
good
could buy
intentions.
feels they can't get it.
Well, that's what Patagonia, who's the owner of Patagonia? That's what he's done.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah, he's
absolutely right.
he's
No,
yeah, he has a lot of land and he does nothing, you know, he just leaves it to
yeah,
nature. And I think, you know,
yeah.
somebody's got to help this country.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think not being scared. There's a very famous TED talk by a Canadian woman who took her pension fund to task because they wouldn't tell her, or she couldn't find out basically where her money was being invested. And it turned out, it was quite a while ago, it turned out it was in tobacco, it was in oil, it was in arms, it was all the things she didn't want to invest in.
All right.
And it was a fascinating talk that she basically took them on and said, you know, she wanted choice about where her pension money was going.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because I think the companies make it really tricky, and I have to really dig in to try and find out where things are going.
Yeah.
And I definitely don't know it all. I really don't. The more I know, the more I realize I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But having an awareness of where your money is going, so each pound, and that's another thing, give each pound a job kind of thing, give each dollar a job. So know where it's going. Don't just assume that because it's being invested, that it's being invested in what you really believe in.
Yeah. I guess it's also, you also want to, I was speaking to somebody, I probably maybe shouldn't say this, but they put their investments, they're very eco, and they put their investments into quite a lot of environmentally friendly avenues,
Yeah.
and they didn't do so well. So
Yeah.
I guess we also want to make sure that there's something that obviously that it's very effective for when we
Yeah,
are older and
and
it
that's why you
grows
need,
and it
yeah,
grows.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's why you need diversity. And yes, I think there was something in the news last week about withdrawal of some green funding, wasn't there?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, I mean, trends are good, but I think you need a good solid portfolio which has got a really good range of investments,
Yeah.
different countries, different industries,
Yeah.
and some will do well. Who
Yeah,
can
you're going to win some, lose some with anything,
absolutely,
aren't you? And I think you just have to be
absolutely.
comfortable with it.
Yeah. And I would just always say be aware of the fees. I think people get surprised by fees. I think I was looking for stocks and shares ISA. I was just chatting at one of the local building societies here, and they said they were going to charge, I don't know, 6% or something. Well, it's normally 0.5%. And I was like, oh my goodness, they're flogging this product.
Yeah,
They're not doing very much, but they're charging 6% for
I
it.
know. I think that's a really important thing to get across. Because when I moved my pension across a year and a half ago, it was the fees. It was because of everything. And then I was reading about fees, and I'd never actually looked into it. I had just looked at the growth.
Mm.
And actually, when you look at it over kind of 30, 40-year period, it makes a big, big, big difference. And
Yeah.
so I moved it across, and I guess it's now I can see it on my app every day. It's driving
Yeah.
me crazy right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
But the fees are so much lower. And I was talking to somebody else because somebody had recommended another company, and they were going to charge me, I think it was 2.5% just to transfer it. And I
Yeah.
just thought, well, you're not having 2.5% of my money if I'm going to be making you money for the next, 30 years. So I think you do have to really do your research.
Yeah.
And
And once you get in that space where you've been, which is a diligent space, you get precious about who gets your money.
yeah, and it's boring. Like I find
Yeah.
like that stuff is boring. But you have to do it. Otherwise you wake up in 20, 30 years time and actually, it could have been, and it's your money.
Yeah.
It's what you earn. So it
Yeah.
should be yours at the end plus the interest.
And I think making that time, I mean, I'm as guilty as anybody, I mean, I know I talk about it all the time and I do very much do the mindset, but it's not that exciting, is it really? And I know that there's an ISA at the moment which has been transferred, but they're always swapping names, aren't they, and transferring
Yeah.
things. And I noticed there's a monthly fee gone on one, and I was like, oh, flipping heck, I didn't know that was on there.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to find time, and I said to my husband last night. I said, oh my goodness, I'm going to block out Wednesday, and I'm going to have to do it, because otherwise I just keep putting it off on my to-do list,
Yeah.
because there's more important or more interesting things to do. Whereas in fact, I have to sit down and get it sorted.
Yeah.
Do that tomorrow. Yeah.
Some women on here are going to be business owners, limited companies. What's the most tax effective or efficient way of minimizing your tax? Can we talk a little bit
Oh
about
gosh, Arlene, no,
reducing our tax a little bit? And obviously, for anyone who is listening, please seek advice for yourself.
yeah. I mean, I would say the most tax efficient thing you can do is get a really good accountant.
Yeah.
Or bookkeeper, because they really know it. And I think when you're setting up your business and you're an entrepreneur, and you're having all the ideas, and you're working really hard, because you wear all those different hats, don't you?
Yeah.
I think getting yourself sorted at the beginning with some good advice and a good system, so whether of recording, is the most sensible thing you can do. And there's some incredible young accountants coming through now who are on Instagram and TikTok, who are running practices which are really open in terms of how to help you make tax efficient decisions within your business. But I would say, I mean, that's not my world.
No.
I would say again, it's always have, you talked about having different mentors, and I think it's the same
Yeah.
business. You need to have, for example, within my business, I have a legal mentor. So she within her membership, I know I have all my legal documents sorted.
Yeah.
Financial one, a mindset one, whatever else you want.
Yeah.
But you create a team, don't you, of those people who can support you. And I think, you're very much within your money team, you need your practical accountant. And then I would say you need your money mindset coach.
Yeah.
Because it's only when you start doing these things that you realize, when you step off that 9 to 5 and being paid just, to go to work, it's really hard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm not dissing anyone's job, sorry.
No.
But the minute you step off onto the entrepreneur world, it's a whole different mind game.
Oh, it is. And there, like you say, there are a lot of plates that we have to
yes,
control.
absolutely.
Yeah. So what is the just to get a little bit more into the mindset things, what are some of the habits, or how do you approach somebody with maybe a lot of people don't actually think about what their philosophy or their relationship is with money.
Yeah.
What are some of the habits? Is it almost like not a negligence, intentional negligence, but almost I guess just kind of a bit of a blockage to money? Or what do you see? What are some of the first steps that you would do to, I guess, to work with somebody who clearly doesn't have a very good relationship with money?
Yeah. I think it's really important to help people to feel safe around money.
Yeah.
And you have to feel safe in your mind, and you have to trust yourself, and fear plays a really big part, actually. And a lot of that goes, does go back to childhood and stories and societal fear and the driving of news and the media. It all contributes. And I think a lot of my work is around, allowing people to shift a paradigm when it comes to what they can have. So believing, starting to look at those thoughts that are tripping them up, and then, applying practical solutions, but also, whilst working on the mindset. I think it's really important. I think a lot of people, we have so many thoughts all the time.
Yeah.
The negative thoughts can be really powerful. And we don't give ourselves space, particularly with phones, just to be and relax, and just to find space to think clearly about money, and about how we want it to be in our lives, and how we want to be. And I think shifting into a mindset where you think that money is good, that being wealthy is good.
Yeah.
Women and wealth is a really positive thing.
And also that you're deserving of it as well. I think maybe that's a big one.
Yeah. I would say a gratitude practice is really important, because I think we never stop. If you read Abraham Hicks or anything like that,
Yeah.
you know, we never stop striving, do we? So whatever we get, if you think about where you are, you know, you're living the life that you probably decided you wanted to live, you know,
Yeah.
and being grateful for where you are. But because we're human, we never stop desiring the
Yeah.
next thing and the next thing. So I think allowing yourself some grace just to appreciate where you are, have gratitude. I mean, I do a lot with visualization, with
Okay.
affirmations, lots of exercises, lots of really powerful exercises, as well as the practical steps. And I think taking responsibility is a huge thing.
Yeah.
I think with a lot of women, we're used to, you know, just not having to take responsibility around the money. And if
I think we talked a little bit about too. I think sometimes if you're, you know, if you stay home with the kids and if you're the, I guess if you're not the bread earner, the main breadwinner, then, you know, you may feel like your husband takes care of the money. And we don't necessarily know that they are. But I
yeah,
think maybe in society we would just assume because it is more of a male role, let's be honest here. You know, it doesn't necessarily, it may shift, but I think,
bins and bills, they call it, don't
yeah. But it's interesting what you say about gratitude. I'm trying to think of his name. But he talks about grateful, never satisfied. And I think it's quite interesting because we want to stay driven.
Yeah,
So it's finding a nice, healthy balance of I'm grateful for everything that I have, but
yeah,
I'm still hungry.
yeah.
And it's not
And
necessarily about wealth, but it's about a big life.
yeah. Well,
And
that's
money does
that's
give you options. It does. It
yeah.
gives you freedom. It gives you so much.
Yeah, and I think my biggest shift has been into sort of what I would call true abundance. So for, you know, I practice very much deciding how my day will go. Just, you know, at the end of the day, I reflect. I'm very, you know, grateful for what's happened. I always find, you know, I've been in, you know, at our age, we've always had grief. You know, most of us have experienced grief in, you know, pretty traumatic forms. So I think, you know, when you've got yourself out of that situation, you will have had a practice like that, maybe, you know, finding one good thing in your day. So I think having a strong sense of yourself is really important. And I think very often we farm that out
Yeah.
in an energetic way. You know, so keeping our energy tight and keeping ourselves responsible for ourselves, and then enjoying life, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
enjoying and I don't know, just doing different things. I don't want to live the same day on repeat for
No.
the next 40 years. That's
I
not how
think
I
as
do it. Some people,
self-employed people, I don't think you ever have a day that's exactly the same as the
but
day before.
I
It
think
all
if you've
shifts.
had kids and if you've been definitely if you've been a teacher, no day is ever the same.
No, no. Who would want
um,
every day to be the same though? You know,
no, but some people, you know, some people want that safety and they want, you know,
maybe.
they don't want it to be different. Whereas, you know, I think not judging others is a big thing.
Yes.
And especially with money, don't think that just because someone's driving a great big stocking Beamer or whatever that they paid for it, because it probably haven't. You know,
No.
keeping up with the Joneses, it's not worth it.
No, I guess that's what we see on Instagram. I think that's one of the downfalls of all of that social media stuff, isn't it?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
you can consistently, if you're on it enough, you could probably constantly kind of beat yourself up and
yeah, yeah,
feel small.
yeah, definitely.
Any last words, Lindsay?
Well, but you know, Arlene, it's just lovely to talk to you. It's lovely to be able to have a conversation. I think we can all contribute to the conversation on money. I think it's
Yeah.
really important. And I think those British Victorian values of, you know, money is vulgar, like when we started at the beginning, you know, you can't talk about it. I think
Yeah.
we should talk about it.
Yeah.
That's not in a bragging sense. I just
No.
think it's just really healthy to talk about it because it's a big part of our lives. It affects everything we do.
Yeah.
Um, and it can do such great good. And
Yeah.
I wish for every woman to have, you know, wealth and freedom
Yeah.
and be
Because
happy.
there's so much now written about abundance, and it's the energetic side of it, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It's you know,
It's
you have to make a positive decision towards, you know, and wealth equally. I don't think it's just about money. I think it's about wealth in your health, it's
Yeah.
wealth in your relationships, it's wealth in your career, it's wealth in your passions and your purpose. I think it's everywhere, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
We just
Well, it's
have these
interesting.
singular words which mean so many different things.
Yeah. Well, they do. They say that a lot. Your health is your wealth. Your wealth is your health. Your health
Yeah.
is your wealth. And
Mm.
it's very true. I guess I see a lot of people who, any age are in pain and they can, or they have any health issues really. And it's no matter how much money they have in the bank, there's nothing they wouldn't do to
No,
feel good. It doesn't matter how much you have if you can't
yeah.
lift your suitcases or if you've got, anything that's kind of disabling you from living your best life at any age, really. I mean, sometimes we see, I mean, I saw the early 30s, yesterday and can't work right now. It's what did that look like in 30 years time?
Yeah.
If he did nothing about it. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting. So it's not like you say, it's not just about the money, it's not just about the cash. It's about the combination of that health
Yeah.
and wealth.
Yeah, and adding your habits into your daily walk or your
Yeah.
yoga practice or your swim or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Creating the whole bundle, hey?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. It was absolutely lovely, very interesting. Got lots of notes.
It's lovely to talk to you. Thank
You
you very
too.
much for inviting me on.
Thank you very much. And we will, so tell us a little bit about how, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you and work with you, we'll put all your contact details in the show notes. So if
Yes.
anyone wants to
Yeah.
get in touch with
Yeah.
Lindsay, because you do programs, don't you?
Yeah, I run so Money L Plates
Yeah,
is my educational program series. So I do different different courses or masterclasses on property, credit card debt, investing, that kind of thing. But then I also do my private coaching side, and that's more to do with the money mindset and combining a little bit of action. But yeah, so I'm lindsaycressey.com, at Lindsay Cressey on Instagram. I tend to be more on Instagram than LinkedIn. I need to improve my LinkedIn activity.
so do I.
That's on my list as
I don't
well.
get LinkedIn yet.
Oh, we're only human, Ollie. We're only human.
Oh, like I said, plates spinning everywhere.
Yeah. So info at lindsaycressey.com if you want to have a conversation. I'm very much there and responding, and also in my DMs on Instagram. So yeah,
Perfect.
I'm happy to have any conversation. And I just my job is just to give people moments of light and just think, actually, that that's something I want to do.
Yeah.
And just to give them a bit of an aha and ideas. That's all it is. I run it from an educational point of view. I'm not a financial advisor, very much from a practical and educational point of view, and just inspiring people to have more confidence around the money. That's what it's all about.
I think it's important. I think it's what the world needs. I think it's what women need.
Yeah.
It's been incredibly interesting talking to you. And I'm sure our paths will cross at some point as well.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jo.